8 sheep were led, one at a time, into a pen at the University of Cambridge. In front of each one were 2 computer screens. On one screen was the face of a celebrity: Barack Obama, Emma Watson, Jake Gyllenhaal. On the other, a total stranger. Pick the familiar face, get a food pellet. The sheep picked correctly about 79% of the time. Then the researchers tilted the photographs, showing the same faces at an angle the sheep had never seen. The sheep still picked them out. That rules out simple image memorization. These animals were recognizing a face as a face, the way you do. And these are the animals whose name we use as an insult for having no mind of your own. That is the subject of this video, and I want to be blunt about where it lands. The sheep may be the single most precisely wrong thing we have ever said about an animal. Because this creature remembers individual faces for years, passes cognitive tests that had only ever been passed by primates, has best friends, gets measurably pessimistic when life goes badly, medicates itself, and has arguably shaped human civilization more than any animal except the dog. And we look at it and see a walking coat with nothing behind the eyes. Let me show you what is actually behind those eyes. If you want the real version of the animals we think we understand, subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly that. Start with the face research, because it is the strongest evidence we have, and it goes back further than most people realize. In 2001, a team led by Keith Kendrick published a paper in Nature titled, and I am not making this up, Sheep Don't Forget a Face. They found that an individual sheep could remember the faces of 50 other sheep for more than 2 years. 50 individuals. 2 years.
Try to name 50 specific people you saw 2 years ago and could pick out of a lineup. But the memory is not even the most interesting part. Kendrick's team went into the brain itself, recording from individual neurons in the sheep's temporal lobe, and found specialized cells that responded selectively to particular faces. That is the same basic architecture we have. Humans have dedicated face processing regions in the temporal cortex, and so, it turns out, does the sheep. There is even a comparable bias toward the right hemisphere in both species. Evolution built a face recognition system into a grazing animal using much the same blueprint it used in us. Why? Because faces matter enormously to a sheep. It lives in a group of individuals with relationships and history, and it needs to know at a glance who this is, whether they are family, whether they are trouble. Recognizing a face is not a party trick for a sheep. It is basic social infrastructure. Now, let me be honest about the celebrity study I opened with, because I would rather you trusted me than be impressed. When Nanol, Goncalves, and Morton published that work in 2017, other researchers pushed back. A group argued that the sample was small, 8 animals, and that the data did not prove sheep process faces in the sophisticated, holistic way humans do. That criticism is fair, and the authors and other scientists engaged with it in print. What survived the argument is this: nobody seriously disputes that sheep recognize faces, including human faces, including from flat photographs. The debate is about how closely their mechanism matches ours, not about whether the ability exists. Kendrick's older neuroscience, with its face-selective neurons and 2-year memory, does the heavy lifting. And that is the honest position. Not the sheep is secretly a genius. Just this:
an animal we describe as brainless is running a face recognition system with dedicated neural hardware and remembering the results for years. Now to the study that should have ended the argument entirely, and which almost nobody has heard of. In 2011, Jenny Morton and Laura Avanzo at Cambridge published work in PLOS One with a deliberately provocative title: Executive Decision-Making in the Domestic Sheep. Executive function is the top tier of cognition. It is your ability to hold a rule in mind, apply it, notice when it stops working, and switch strategies. It is what fails first in Huntington's disease, in Alzheimer's, in schizophrenia. In humans, it is measured with a specific battery of tasks, and those same tasks are the gold standard for testing monkeys. They gave those tasks to sheep. Discrimination learning. Learn that blue means food and yellow does not.
Then reversal learning, where the rule silently flips and yellow is now correct, which requires abandoning a habit that just worked. Then attentional set shifting, the hardest tier, where the animal has to stop attending the color altogether and start attending the shape instead, and abandon an entire strategy rather than just an answer. The sheep did all of it. And the researchers wrote something remarkable in their conclusion, that to their knowledge, this was the first time these executive functions had been demonstrated in any large animal apart from primates. Not the first time in sheep, the first time in any large non-primate animal at all. That result was sitting in the scientific literature while the rest of us went on using the word sheep to mean an idiot who cannot think for itself. And notice why they ran the experiment. It was not affection for sheep. Sheep have brains comparable in size to a macaque's. They live a long time, and their brain structure makes them useful for studying neurodegenerative disease. Sheep are now used as large animal models for Huntington's disease. To do that work, researchers needed to know whether a sheep could even do a cognitive test. They assumed the answer might be no. The animal surprised them. So the intelligence is real and measured. Now the emotional life, which is where the picture gets uncomfortable. Sheep have moods, and those moods bend how they see the world. Researchers use a technique called judgment bias testing. Train an animal that a bucket in one location holds food and in another location holds nothing. Then put a bucket somewhere ambiguous, in between. An optimistic animal goes to check. A pessimistic one does not bother. It is a way of asking an animal, without language, whether it currently expects good things or bad ones.
Sheep kept under chronic stress and unpredictable conditions became measurably pessimistic. They stopped investigating the ambiguous bucket. Their learning suffered too. This is the same phenomenon we call a negative cognitive bias in humans, and it is one of the clearest signals we have that an animal is experiencing something like a mood rather than just reacting moment to moment. A stressed sheep does not merely act stressed. It starts expecting the worst. The flip side has been measured too. Researchers studying positive emotion in sheep found physiological and behavioral markers of contentment, including a particular relaxed ear posture and shifts in heart rate variability. There is now a whole research field working out how to read a sheep's emotional state from its ears and its face, because the information is genuinely in there. And they have relationships.
Sheep form close, specific, lasting bonds with particular individuals, and separation from those individuals causes real distress. Isolate a sheep from its group, and it bleats, its heart rate climbs, its stress hormones spike. Bring back a familiar companion, and it calms. Bring back a stranger, and it does not calm nearly as much. It is not the presence of another sheep that helps. It is the presence of that sheep, the one it knows. In one striking line of research, isolated sheep were shown photographs of familiar sheep faces, and even the pictures reduced their stress responses. A photograph of a friend, offered to an animal we call mindless, measurably calmed its body down. Rams take it further. Males form long-term alliances, keeping company with the same partners over time and backing each other in conflicts. That is politics.
That requires remembering who your allies are, who owes you, and who cannot be trusted. Which brings us right back to why an animal like this needs a face recognition system with dedicated neurons. The strongest bond of all, though, is between a ewe and her lamb, and it forms with startling speed and precision. Within the first hours after birth, there is a critical window in which mother and lamb learn each other, by smell first and then by voice and appearance. Get that window wrong, separate them too early, and the bond may not form at all. Once formed, it is remarkably specific. In a field of hundreds of animals, with lambs constantly calling, a ewe picks out her own lamb's voice from all the others, and the lamb picks out hers. Two individuals locating each other by sound alone inside a wall of noise. Anyone who has stood next to a flock at lambing time has heard that chaos and assumed it was chaos. It is not.
It is hundreds of simultaneous conversations, each one between exactly two animals. And when a lamb dies, the ewe's behavior changes in ways that are hard to watch. She searches. She calls, repeatedly, and returns to the place she last had it, sometimes for days. I want to be careful here, because we cannot ask her what she feels, and science rightly refuses to claim more than the data supports. But what is measurable is a prolonged, specific, distressed searching behavior directed at one missing individual. Whatever that is from the inside, it is not the behavior of an animal that does not notice or does not care. Sheep are also, quietly, very good mothers in a practical sense. Ewes will position themselves between their lamb and a perceived threat, and in cold weather a lamb will shelter against its mother's flank. And there is one detail that deserves more attention than it gets. Lambs can walk within an hour or so of being born. They have to.
In an animal with no defense but the group, a newborn that cannot follow the flock is a newborn that gets left behind. And every part of a lamb is built around solving that problem fast. Which leaves the obvious objection. If sheep are all this, why do they act like that? Why do they follow each other blindly off cliffs and into the same corner and through the same gate for no reason? This is the heart of the misunderstanding, and the answer is that flocking is not stupidity. It is arithmetic. Look at what a sheep is. It has no claws, no serious teeth, no venom, no armor, no burrow, no speed advantage over a wolf, and eyes on the sides of its head, which is the universal signature of an animal that gets eaten. Its ancestors evolved on open ground with predators. For an animal built like that, there is exactly one defense, and it is the group. The mathematics of this is well understood, and biologists call it the selfish herd.
If you are alone in the open, a predator's chance of choosing you is 100%. In a flock of 100, it is 1 in 100, and better still if you are in the middle rather than the edge. So the correct move, the rational move, when something frightening appears, is to get into the center of the group immediately and match what everyone else is doing. Hesitating to evaluate the situation independently is how your genes leave the pool. That is what you are watching when a flock moves as one. Not an absence of individual minds. The opposite. 100 individual minds all correctly running the same survival calculation at the same time, and running it fast. And it demonstrably works, which is why this behavior appears in fish, in starlings, in antelope, and in the huddle of a crowd when something goes wrong in a public place. We do it too. We just do not insult ourselves for it. There is a second, subtler thing happening.
Sheep are followers of leaders they know. Studies of flock movement find that the group is often steered by particular individuals, frequently older, experienced ewes, and that the rest follow them specifically. That is not blank conformity, it is a decision about whose judgment to trust, and it is precisely what a well-run group of any species does.
And even the cliff story is mostly wrong. Sheep do not commit mass suicide. What happens is that a flock in a panic follows the animal in front through a gap, and if the leader is wrong, momentum and pressure from behind carry the others into trouble before they can stop. It is a stampede, a physical failure cascade, and it is the same reason human crowd disasters kill people who could see perfectly well what was happening. Blame the physics of a panicking crowd, not the intellect of the animal. Now the body, because the sheep's senses are strange and superb in ways that go unnoticed. Look closely at a sheep's eye. The pupil is not round, it is a horizontal rectangle, and that is not decoration. Research on pupil shape found a clean pattern across species. Ambush predators tend to have vertical slits, good for judging distance to a target.
Grazing prey animals tend to have horizontal ones, which widen the field of view along the horizon, sharpen the panoramic image of the ground, and cut glare from the sky above. Combine that pupil with side-mounted eyes and a sheep gets a field of view in the region of 270 to well over 300 degrees. Standing still, head down in the grass, it can see almost everything around it, including behind, without moving its head. It is watching you right now even when it appears not to be. Then there is the part that sounds invented. When a sheep lowers its head to graze, its eyes rotate in their sockets to keep the horizontal pupils level with the ground. The head tilts, and the eyes counter-rotate to hold the panoramic strip of vision aligned where the danger is. It is built-in image stabilization, running automatically, so the animal never loses its wide-angle view of the horizon while it eats. The trade-off is depth perception.
All that panoramic coverage comes at the cost of the binocular overlap you need to judge distance precisely, which is one reason sheep are cautious about shadows, gaps, and changes in ground surface. What reads to us as skittish stupidity in front of a drain cover is an animal with superb horizon coverage and poor depth judgment, making a sensible decision not to gamble. Then there is the head itself, and specifically what rams do with it. When two rams contest dominance, they back up, charge, and collide skull first at speed, and the crack of it carries across a valley. The impact forces involved are severe enough that they should, by any reasonable expectation, cause serious brain injury. They mostly do not, and the reason is engineering.
A ram's horns are not solid weapons. They are built over a bony core with a keratin sheath, and the skull beneath is unusually thick, with a layered, partly porous internal structure that behaves like a crumple zone, absorbing and dispersing the shock rather than transmitting it straight into the brain. The neck musculature is enormous, stiffening the whole head and neck column at impact so the head does not whip. The animal is, in effect, wearing a purpose-built helmet that it grew itself, and researchers studying impact protection have taken a serious interest in exactly how it works. The horns are honest signaling too. They keep growing throughout a ram's life, laying down annual rings, so the size and mass of a set of horns is a public record of age, health, and staying power. Much of the time rivals read each other's horns and the fight never happens at all, which is precisely the point of an expensive signal.
Their hearing is sharp and directional, with mobile ears that swivel toward sound, and their sense of smell is excellent, good enough for a ewe to identify her own lamb by scent within minutes of birth, and to detect predators on the wind. And there is one more piece of equipment worth understanding, because it explains why this animal could live where nothing else could. A sheep does not really eat grass, it farms it. Sheep are ruminants, which means the stomach is divided into 4 chambers, and the first and largest of them, the rumen, is not a digestive organ in the way yours is. It is a fermentation tank. It holds a vast living population of bacteria, protozoa, and fungi, in numbers that run into the billions per milliliter. And those microbes do something no mammal can do on its own. They break down cellulose, the tough structural fiber that makes up plant cell walls, and that human digestion cannot touch at all. The sheep supplies the tank, the warmth, the moisture, and the chewing. The microbes supply the chemistry, and then the sheep digests the byproducts, and in some cases the microbes themselves. Grass, which is nutritionally close to worthless to us, becomes muscle, milk, and fleece. That is what the chewing is. A sheep swallows roughly cropped grass, lets the rumen work on it, then brings a compacted ball of it back up to the mouth and chews it again, properly, before swallowing it once more. Sheep spend something like 8 hours a day doing this. It looks like idleness. It is processing. And notably, an animal only ruminates properly when it feels safe, which makes cud chewing one of the better quick indicators that a flock is calm and unstressed. The consequence is enormous. Because of that partnership with its own gut microbes, a sheep can extract a living from steep, thin, rocky, marginal ground where you could not grow a crop and could not sustain cattle, which is exactly why sheep are found on hillsides, moorland, mountain slopes, and semi-desert across the world. They are how humans turned unfarmable land into food and clothing. Half the landscapes we now consider iconically pastoral exist in their current form because sheep could eat what nothing else could. And they use that nose for something genuinely clever: self-medication. Sheep learn which plants make them feel ill and avoid them afterward, associating flavor with the consequence hours later.
More impressively, there is research showing that sheep suffering from a specific nutritional problem or gut trouble will preferentially eat plants containing the compounds that address it. And that lambs learn a great deal of this from their mothers, watching what she eats and copying her.
A flock's dietary knowledge of its own pasture is, in effect, culture. It is passed down. Which is why moving sheep to unfamiliar land is genuinely risky. You are not just relocating animals. You are severing them from generations of accumulated local knowledge about which plants are safe.
So that is the animal. Now the part where it quietly rebuilt our world. Sheep were among the very first animals humans ever domesticated, roughly 10 to 11,000 years ago in the Near East, from the wild mouflon. They were there at the beginning of settled human life, alongside goats, before cattle, long before horses or chickens. If you want to picture the earliest farming villages, picture sheep in them. And they were the perfect starter animal, manageable in size, tolerant of poor grazing that will not support cattle, able to live on marginal land, and delivering 4 separate products: meat, milk, hide, and the one that changed everything: wool. It is difficult to overstate what wool did. Before synthetic fibers, wool was one of the only materials that kept a human being alive through a cold, wet winter.
It insulates while wet, unlike almost anything else available, because each fiber is crimped and traps air, and because the fleece carries lanolin, a natural grease the sheep secretes that repels water. That same lanolin, incidentally, is harvested and refined into an ingredient in a huge range of ordinary products, from skin creams and lip balms to lubricants and coatings. Some of it is very likely in your bathroom right now. Whole economies were built on it. Medieval England ran substantially on the wool trade. Vast landscapes were reshaped for grazing, populations moved, fortunes and wars turned on the price of a fleece. But here is the part that should sit uneasily. That wool is not natural. A wild sheep grows a coat and sheds it. It molts like any sensible animal. Over thousands of years, we selectively bred that ability out. Modern wool breeds like the merino grow fleece continuously and cannot shed it at all.
Which means an animal like that must be shorn by a human every single year, or the fleece keeps growing. And when that fails, you get the extreme cases that occasionally make the news. Escaped sheep found after years alone in the wild, staggering under 30 or 40 kilograms of matted fleece, barely able to walk, at risk of overheating and infection. The most famous of them became national news stories. They are usually reported as heartwarming rescues. Look at them properly, and they are something else. They are the price of a design decision we made. We took a self-maintaining animal and made it permanently dependent on us, and then we called it helpless. That pattern runs through the whole story. We bred sheep to be easier to manage, less reactive, more tractable, less inclined to bolt and think for themselves. And then we turned around and used their name as a word for exactly those qualities. We manufactured the trait and then mocked the animal for having it.
But here is the thing that complicates the helpless framing, and I think it is the best evidence of all. Leave sheep alone, and the wild comes straight back. On the remote Scottish island of Herta, in the St. Kilda archipelago, there is a population of Soay sheep, an ancient primitive breed, living entirely without human management. Nobody shears them, nobody feeds them, nobody treats them. They shed their fleece naturally. They breed on their own schedule. They survive brutal Atlantic winters on their own, and their population rises and crashes with the weather and the grazing, exactly like any wild animal. That flock has been studied continuously for decades, and has become one of the most important long-term datasets in evolutionary biology anywhere in the world, teaching us about natural selection, population dynamics, and inheritance in real time. Feral sheep populations have established themselves in other places too, from remote islands to rugged mountain country, doing perfectly well without us. Which tells you the dependence is not intrinsic to the animal, it is intrinsic to the breeds we made. A merino cannot survive without shearing because we built it that way. A Soay simply gets on with it. And the range of what we built is extraordinary. There are somewhere over 1,000 recognized breeds of sheep in the world. There are hair sheep in hot climates that grow no wool worth speaking of and shed naturally. There are fat-tailed breeds across Central Asia and Africa that store energy reserves in an enormous tail, the way a camel uses a hump, as insurance against drought and famine. There are breeds with 4 horns, and breeds with none. There are mountain breeds tough enough to winter on open moorland, and dairy breeds whose milk becomes Roquefort, Pecorino, and Feta.
From one wild ancestor, we sculpted an animal for nearly every landscape humans occupy. The scale of it is easy to miss, too. There are over 1 billion sheep alive on the planet at any moment, spread across almost every country on Earth. In some nations, they comfortably outnumber the human population several times over. This is one of the most successful large mammals in existence, and the only reason it does not feel that way is that we long ago stopped seeing it as an animal at all. It became scenery. And then, in 1996, in a shed outside Edinburgh, a sheep broke biology. Her name was Dolly, and she was born on the 5th of July, 1996, at the Roslin Institute, to a team led by Ian Wilmot and Keith Campbell. She was created by taking the nucleus from a mammary cell of a 6-year-old ewe and fusing it into another sheep's egg that had been stripped of its own DNA. Then that egg was made to divide, and it grew into a lamb.
Before Dolly, the consensus was that this could not be done. Clones had been made from embryonic cells, but an adult cell was supposed to be locked, permanently committed to being a mammary cell and nothing else. Dolly proved that the full instruction set for building an entire animal was still present in that specialized adult cell and could be switched back on. That single result reopened biology. It fed directly into the stem cell revolution and into the work that later showed adult cells can be reprogrammed to an embryonic-like state, which is now foundational to regenerative medicine. When her existence was announced in February 1997, it set off a global argument about cloning, ethics, and human identity that has not really ended. Dolly lived to 6.5, had 4 lambs of her own, and was put down in 2003 after developing arthritis and a lung disease common in indoor-housed sheep. She is now displayed in a museum in Edinburgh. And of all the animals on Earth we might have used to prove that adult life could be rewound, it was a sheep. The most underestimated animal in the world became the most scientifically consequential single mammal of the 20th century. She is not the only way sheep serve medicine. Because of their brain size, longevity, and physiology, sheep are used as models in neurodegenerative disease research, in fetal development studies, in surgical training, and in cardiovascular work. Sheep have contributed to human medicine to an extent almost no one is aware of, largely because nobody expects the woolly animal in the field to be near the frontier of anything. So let's total it up. The animal we named our word for mindless conformity after can recognize 50 individuals by face and hold them for years, using dedicated face neurons remarkably like our own. It passed executive function tests that no other large non-primate animal had passed. It has moods that alter how it interprets an ambiguous world. It has friends whose absence is measurably painful and whose photograph is measurably comforting. It runs correct survival mathematics as a group. It sees almost a full circle around itself and rotates its eyes to keep that view level. It medicates itself using knowledge inherited from its mother. It clothed civilization for 10,000 years. And it produced the single most important cloned mammal in history. Meanwhile, our evidence for the stupidity of sheep amounts to this. They stand together in a field, they follow each other, and they do not do much when we look at them. Which brings me to the thing I actually think this is about. And it is not really about sheep at all. We did not judge this animal on its behavior. We judged it on its usefulness. The sheep was one of the first animals we ever took control of, and we bred it, for 10,000 years, toward calm and compliance, because a reactive, independent, clever-acting sheep is a nightmare to keep. We got exactly what we selected for. And then, having engineered the docility ourselves, we decided that docility was the animal's essential nature, and turned its name into a slur. There is a lesson in that which extends well past a field in Wales. We are extraordinarily bad at recognizing a mind in anything that does not make a fuss. We credit intelligence to animals that perform it, that solve puzzles on camera, that use tools, that look us in the eye and demand things. The sheep never demanded anything. It just quietly went on remembering faces for years,
passing tests designed for monkeys, grieving its friends, and waiting for someone to actually run the experiment.
Somebody finally did, and the results have been sitting in Nature and PLOS One for years, while the insult carried on unchallenged. So the next time you hear someone call a person a sheep, meaning that they cannot think, that they only follow, that there is nothing going on behind the eyes, understand what a strange thing is being said. It is a slur, built on an animal that recognizes faces, weighs risk, remembers its friends, learns from its mother, and passed a cognitive test that stumped every other large animal but a monkey. Of everything we have ever gotten wrong about a creature we live beside, this one may be the most complete, the most confident, and the most undeserved. And if you want to know which other everyday animal has been quietly filed under stupid while doing something remarkable, that is precisely what the next one is about. Subscribe and pick your suspect in the comments. I would bet you are underestimating it too.